Hi, everyone. My name is Amin and I'm with Unizin, and I have Jennifer asked me to speak, and I was very happy to do so, and then she gave me the subject, and then I was trying to find a way to back out, because this is a very large and difficult subject to talk about, and I was going to talk about adaptive learning and how Unizin's thinking about that, then I saw that Dale was speaking before me, and he's forgotten more about adaptive learning than I know, so I was like, that's not gonna end well. So I'm here to talk about what I know about Unizin and learner analytics and how we're thinking about the two. So the topic is learner analytics to support quality teaching and learning, and my first question was, well, what is quality? So one of the things that Unizin really thinks about when we talk about teaching and learning and how we improve the outcomes is we are currently focused on in-course student outcomes. So, and it's not only moving the mean. I know a lot of people have talked about moving the mean of a course up. That's, it's not a complex problem. It's a hard problem, but it's a relatively simple problem. You find one or two students, you raise their average from where they were before, and you've moved the mean. That's relatively straightforward. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce the range of in-course student outcomes. So that means taking the bell curve and making it smaller so the outliers are no longer outliers. And also, we talk about learner analytics and not learning analytics because we don't think you can separate the activity from the student. And Derek from the previous talk, he kind of mentioned this as well, where we're really focused on personalized learning, not individual learning. So in our mind, there's a difference behind that, and a lot of what we do drives to that. So I'm sure a lot of you are asking, well, what is Unizin? So Unizin is a consortium made up of most of you in this room, actually. So I started with Unizin about 2.5 years ago. We've been running full steam for about 18, 20 months now. We have a team of 20 people, mostly based in Austin, Texas. Unizin is it's a nonprofit consortium made up of these 11 what we call founding members. So the founding members were the first ones to come in. And then Nancy made sure that the rest of the Florida system came in as well. So if your badge is up here, you are part of Unizin. You're technically my boss, I guess, the way we're legally organized. So everything I'm going to talk about today, you can avail yourself of. I'm happy to answer more questions about that. So if you have questions during this talk, feel free to raise your hand. I'm happy to take them while we're going. I was just updating these slides like up to 5 minutes before the talk, so some of this is going to be a surprise for me as well. So why does Unizin exist? So when I started 2.5 years ago, I used to work at the University of Minnesota, and then I went off, got my MBA, and did a lot of consulting work for other people, and this opportunity came up, and one of my questions was, why are you guys doing Unizin? And the answer was affordability, access to better course materials and learner data, and ultimately improving student success. The universities in our consortium, there's a lot of shared challenges. There's a lot of things that all of you are struggling with or challenged with, both from external factors and internal factors. And again, these are like-minded universities that have come together. We don't have very small liberal arts schools in our consortium. We don't have foreign schools in our consortium because we're all trying to solve similar problems. And for now, anyway, the homogeny actually helps us. So analytics. One of the things that we're trying to do around analytics is building a data warehouse, for lack of a better word. How do we get a large aggregated set of data from all of our universities to help support teaching and learning, both in the classroom and from the research side? These data, again, come from different interactions and different places, and I'll talk a little bit more about data sources and what we're doing with them. But basically, these are sources that you already have. How many of you here spend even part of your day or week dealing with data? That's a good number. So part of what Unizin's trying to do is we're trying to help streamline that process. So the data is managed universally. So I'm sure a lot of you are doing a lot of the same cleanup things. So how do we do that at a consortium-wide level? So rather than spending your days messing around with data, you can actually do stuff with that data. So the data sources, like I said, these are data sources that already exist at many of the universities. So from the learning environment, things like the learning management system, Canvas, we work with Canvas pretty closely. We get both nightly data feeds as well as real-time data from Canvas. The eText reader, so Unison has its own eText reader called Engage. It does a lot of the same things that you heard the gentleman from VitalSource talk about. We get real-time data out of that as well, so, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. From media players, some video interaction, for example, and then other tools. There's student information system data, so demographic data about students. Obviously, when you're talking about analytics, and you're talking about how students are going to perform, where they come from, there actually matters, and then other activities. And the other activities, one of the questions that always comes up is around student privacy and students' right to know. So I'm going to try to get in front of this question and say my answers are either it depends or I don't know, because it depends or I don't know. Some of the data I think is shared by students voluntarily. Some of it is collected without their knowledge, and what's done with it is unknown to them. It's probably unknown to many of you as well. So that's not an area where we've moved into so far. Right now we're focusing on number 1. We're moving into number 2, and then number 3 will come later. So our principles around data. So we capture and deposit data where it makes sense. So we're not trying to create new data flows. We're not trying to create new data out of anything. We're aggregating data that's currently available. We also are building an architecture that allows universities to add their own data. So when you talk about number 3, about things like card swipe data, for example, Unison doesn't necessarily need to have that data, but I'm sure a lot of the analytics that your universities are doing would benefit from having that data. So how do we allow you to add that data to the overall Unison data set and keep it segmented from everyone else? And again, we're trying to have consistent data formats. And part of the reason this is we want to be able to support cross-institutional research and cross-institutional collaboration on the research and teaching and learning sides. Having a consistent data format makes that much easier. So when you're talking to a colleague across the state or across the country, again, we don't want the data to be the barrier to collaboration or progress. There are 2 domains that we're currently focused on from an analytics perspective. So one is the actual learner analytics or learning analytics, and the other is on the research side. So on the learner analytics side, this is really about surfacing useful aggregate information through classic data manipulation. So it means capturing raw data. We don't necessarily use it directly, and then we run it through, I guess what we would call an insight generator. So one of the things that we've built is called a sentiment analyzer, sentiment analysis tool. I forget which way we decided to do that. But what that does is it takes discussions from inside Canvas, and it does natural language processing on it, and it looks at what is again, the sentiment of the student who wrote it. Are they upset? Are they frustrated? Are they confused? And that allows, like everyone else has been talking, it allows faculty to be able to identify students who are challenged or not challenged, but allows them to identify that without having to go through and read a bunch of discussions. So that's an example of what we're trying to do around, again, learning time data. So quality teaching and learning, this is a spectrum that how we kind of think about analytics. So on the left side, on your left, I guess, it starts as access as reporting. And again, a lot of this data is not easily accessible today. It's not, we saw the hands come up earlier. People spend a lot of time trying to aggregate the data, clean it up. So that's over here on the left side, data access. We're spending a lot of our time on that because we think if you get that right, the other stuff becomes much, much easier. But eventually, we want to evolve to having data models. How do we interpret that data in specific and consistent ways? What kind of interventions do we envision coming out of certain types of data? So how do we get there? Again, by surfacing useful aggregate information, and this is through the classic data manipulation, the things that people have been doing for a long time. Again, this is about the sentiment analyzer. Like I said, I just worked on these slides, so I'm getting ahead of myself. And some of the tools that we have. So the first one is Unizin Course Monitor. So some of you may know this as Snapshot. We're not allowed to use Snapshot anymore, so now it's called Course Monitor. It's not a sordid story, unfortunately. It's much more boring than that. But basically what this allows is it allows instructors to see a dashboard of where their students are, how they're performing. So here on the left side is an individual student. In the middle, you see their outcomes. That's their assignment grades. On the right side is what a faculty would see for their entire course. Again, a very simple red, yellow, green dashboard. What students are struggling, what students aren't struggling. Dale showed an example of this as well that kind of had a cooler summary that we might borrow. But that's basically what we're doing with Course Monitor. This is something that's available now. There's a lot of institutions that are using it. We are really trying to get a lot of feedback from faculty and teaching assistants on how this works. Part of what Unizin is again, it's a consortium that's owned by you, and we're building tools in response to what our members need. So we don't have a profit motive. We don't have our motive is to make tools that are useful to you. So we want faculty to use this. We want to get feedback. We iterate on these a lot. One of the areas that we spend a lot of time, and again, this is another question I'm going to try to get ahead of, is around accessibility. So we spend a lot of time making sure that graphs are accessible, and that's not something that is necessarily easy to do. The other thing is Unizin Engage. So this is our e-text reader. And again, we get real-time data out of Engage. And what you see here on the bottom is, again, a faculty view. A faculty member can see what pages a student has read. So this is pages 1 to 400 of some textbook. You can drill down. You can see specifically when students are interacting with the content. The other thing Engage does, and what you see at the top here, is it allows students to ask questions of faculty while they're in the learning mode. So as they're reading a textbook, they can highlight text. They can say, hey, what does this mean? And the professor, TA, someone else can respond to that. So that's again, Unizin is building a lot of tools. These are what's available today. And tomorrow I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of our other tools, specifically on the content side. We're doing a lot of work on the content side right now. But on the analytics side, that's where we are. So research support. So this is something we are working with researchers. We're working on how do we get these large aggregated data sets? How do we de-identify them appropriately for research needs? How do we work with IRBs to make sure that this data is available? The default is for members to have access to de-identified or anonymized data between the institutions. And again, there's public reports that come out. We want to make sure that this is a collaborative consortium. It's not a bunch of islands working together. And again, I mentioned the IRB stuff. So the Unizin Data Warehouse, this is how we're trying to make all this happen. So each individual university, including some of the universities in this room, have their own Unizin Data Warehouse. Again, it consists of Canvas data, Engage data. We're working on figuring out how we aggregate other data into that and how we connect data across the platform. So again, why is Unizin involved in this? So there's three things that we are trying to help. So the first is around messy data. So data can rarely be used from right out of the system in a way that people want to be able to use it. So there's a lot of transformation costs that happen. So why isn't the data ready to use? And there's some good reasons why. It's not anybody's fault. Context changes. There's integrations that need to happen between different data sets. There are unanticipated uses. So sometimes you need finance data to support a facilities management project that hadn't been envisioned before. And normalizing. Over time, things change, and data from 5 years ago doesn't cleanly map to data today. So the black box problem. So this is also something that Unizin, we have a lot of discussions with a lot of vendors, and this always comes up, and this always ends up being a sticky point. So oftentimes vendors say that their algorithms are their secret sauce, and that's their differentiator. We don't believe that that's the case. We don't think that there's any real differentiation. And as an example, we were working with a vendor. We went through a whole pilot. It was a good semester-long pilot. at the end of the semester, they said, here are our predictions at the beginning of the semester, here they are at the end. And it turns out that their model was 70-something% accurate about this. The grades they thought a student would get, they were 70% accurate, 70-something% accurate, which is great. That's awesome. So we had one of our data scientists work with one of the professors at the university, and they did a linear regression, and we were 83% accurate. So it's not necessarily about the algorithm. So you should really care, because two main reasons. One is algorithms have biases, and you have your biases. The vendors have their biases. Everybody has their biases, but if you get more voices into it and you get more people looking at it, you're hopefully able to flatten out some of those biases and make it a little less biased than it would be otherwise. And the other is accountability. And like I said, there are vendors who say, this is our secret sauce, and we're going to help you increase your retention by whatever %. But if a simple linear regression does better, then is that product actually doing what it says it should do? So the last thing is the algorithm problem, and this is something that is a much larger problem. It's something that everyone in the community is working on together. Is there's going to be more and more algorithms around, and a lot of people really don't understand that. So Dale had a couple of great questions to ask of vendors doing adaptive learning. So some of the questions that we ask are a little bit more basic around what is the supply chain for that data? Where's the data coming from? How is it trained? Who else had input into this? So these are some of the things that I think are important. These are things that Unizin does when we look at our data. These are things that we do when we work with other people. So how does Unizin actually work with you? So the purple here is the Unizin staff, and the green is the university. So we feel that we have a larger role up front. So we can help you get access to data, clean it up, aggregate it, put it in a place that makes it easy for you to do work. But when it comes to actually doing interpretation and intervention and the teaching and learning impacts of that, that's really with you. We want to work with you to understand how you do that, but Unizin, we're not in the classroom, and you are, and we want to make sure that this whole cycle works well together, and we want to partner with you on that. So these are the products and services that we have. Again, we have data movers, data dictionaries, we have a data warehouse, we have dashboards, and like I said, if you look here, once we get to interpretation and intervention, Unizin kind of doesn't fall away, but we have less of a role there, so we haven't exactly identified what products we have we're going to be deploying. So for students, oh, go ahead. Did you have a question? Oh, sorry. So for instructors, what are we doing? So autonomy. We want to help instructors make data-driven decisions. We want to be able to support multiple teaching approaches. We know that there's not one way to teach everybody, from basic, traditional, residential, to flipped classrooms, to MOOCs. Unizin is trying to address all those different platforms and provide data no matter how a professor teaches. Peer network. So there's a Unizin teaching and learning community where faculty, including Jennifer and maybe a few other people in this room, come together and they talk with each other and they share ideas. And there's these communities of practices around things like learner analytics. And finally, there's content sharing, and I'll talk more about this tomorrow, but a big part of analytics and adaptive learning especially is the content, the source of the content, the quality, and so on. So what does Unizin provide in general? So it's a collaborative, transparent platform. What we're trying to do here is we're really trying to reduce your carrying cost and scalability. It's hard work. Again, that's part of the reason why Unizin was founded. We want to make sure that you have control over your data, over your algorithms. We want to make sure you have transparency into where the data comes from, where it's going. We want to make sure you have transparency into the algorithms. And again, we want to do all this so you can focus on using that data and information to improve learner outcomes. So this is the future, an exchange of teaching and learning resources. Again, many of you, almost all of you are part of Unizin, whether you know it or not. So there's a large community outside of Florida as well that's also part of Unizin that I hope you interact with. And to that end, I'm going to do a slight pitch here. We have a Unizin Innovation Summit in Denver where we have Tom Cavanaugh from UCF and others coming to Denver to kind of talk about the things that they're doing that work with Unizin. So how are they using Unizin tools? How are they improving learner outcomes? If you have more questions, you go to unizin.org, there's the URL, or just go to unizin.org, and all the way at the bottom there's a link that says Summit. So that's my high-level summaries. Well, thank you very much.